Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you
Hello and welcome to Self-Inflicted Aural Nostalgia, the Guided by Voices podcast, every GBV LP, every 2 weeks. I'm Jeff Gomez, and today I'll be talking about GBV's 9th record, Under the Bushes, Under the Stars. But first, all music heard in this podcast is played and owned by Guided by Voices. Any reviews or materials cited are owned by their respective creators. Special thanks goes out to Jeff Warren's Guided by Voices database, which you can find at gbvdb.com, and of course, all opinions stated are my own. Subscribe to future episodes or listen to past episodes at everygbvlp.com. If you'd like to drop me a line, you can do so by sending an email to jeff@everygbvlp.com. And once again, I want to quickly mention my new novel, Losing Our Edge. It's all about aging hipsters. It's also about 180 pages. Check it out at losingouredge.com. Now let's get to the show. Okay, we're now up to the year 1996 and GBV's second record for Matador, Under the Bushes, Under the Stars. This would be the same as 1994, a key year for GBV, except instead of everything going right for the band, things started to go a bit wrong. Bob's indecisiveness about what kind of record he wanted to make set the group back a bit. They started to have some trouble with their label, and by the end of the year, the band's current lineup would be dissolved. All the glory that came with Alien Lanes' six-figure deal and the endless news stories written about the band seemed to disappear. More importantly, Pollard began to doubt himself. His relationships with indie rock royalty like Kim Deal and Steve Albini also soured. In 1996, GBV were, in a sense, the band that fell to earth. None of this, of course, stopped Bob or Guided by Voices from releasing material. In fact, it was the opposite, and that was kind of the problem. In '96, they released what would be their longest record until double album August by Cake in 2017. They also released 2 EPs, a fan club-only LP, and 2 singles. 1996 also saw the release on the same day of solo records by Pollard and Tobin Sprout. Bob's was noisy and experimental, while Tobin's was confident and polished. All this activity signaled that Bob was going to keep doing things his way. Whether or not he knew he was compromising his and the band's financial and commercial future, there's no way to know. But I think that the explosion of material in 1996, as well as the refusal to issue their next record as a slimmed-down, solid-state affair, set the course for GBV's eventual future, for better or worse. As usual with all of GBV's records, what provided the initial spark for their new LP was all but extinguished by the time the record was finally released. The follow-up to Alien Lanes was initially going to be a concept record called The Power of Suck. It was going to be loosely based on the backstory and rise of GBV, and it was going to come complete with a short story by the band's bassist at the time, writer Jim Greer. The record started out as a traditional LP, but Bob kept adding songs to the point where, if it had been recorded and released as Pollard was envisioning it at the time, it would have been a double record. Similar to the Beach Boys' lost classic Smile, which existed only in bootleg and fanzine form until the Brian Wilson recreation in 2004, and the release of the work-in-progress version in 2011, there are partial reconstructions of The Power of Suck online. Once again, the blog Shitcanned has a bunch of great info about this, which I'll link to on the Facebook page. Back in 1995, MTV was reporting that the record was going to have 19 tracks and that it would include the songs Deaf Ears, Newton's Hopeless Marriage, Systems Crash, and Delayed Reaction. And, of course, in true Pollard fashion, none of those songs appeared on Under the Bushes. Those weren't even Power of Suck songs, so it's yet another testament to the endless supply of Bob's tunes. Some of these tracks would appear on singles or EPs at the time of the record's release. Deaf Ears was a B-side on the official Ironman's Rally song single, while Systems Crash led off the Plantations of Pale Pink EP. In the Watch Me Jumpstart documentary, you can see Bob and Sprout recording Systems Crash in Toby's basement. The original producer of the record was going to be Kim Deal, who, by this time, Bob had formed an important friendship with. She'd been a fan of the band for a few years now, and she and Pollard had worked together on a few different projects. She was also engaged to GBV's bassist at the time, Jim Greer, which ensured that she was often in the band's orbit. A few years prior, Deal and Pollard even contributed a haunting and lovely duet of Love Hurts to the soundtrack for the film Love into 45. Kevin's wearing a shirt for the movie in one of his Watch Me Jumpstart interviews. The soundtrack featured a bunch of 90s bands, including Jesus and Mary Chain, Flaming Lips, Mazzy Star, and Meat Puppets. Pollard later said that his wife, also named Kim, hated his collaboration with Deal, thinking that the two of them were in love, which Bob later admitted he kind of were. On Mark Maron's WTF podcast, Kim Deal talked about her relationship with Pollard, at first audibly sighing in an annoying kind of way when Moran initially brings him up. Deal insists that she didn't want to produce GBV's next record, but that Bob persisted, saying, "But I love your guitar sounds," so Deal said yes. The problem is that Bob didn't want to put in the time to get that great sound. Plus, the fact that the band had to rehearse the songs for hours grated on the guys, who never spent much time recording their songs, let alone rehearsing them. In a cover story in CMJ magazine that appeared around the time of the release of Under the Bushes, Mitch Mitchell talked about the LP's preparation. "We rehearsed in Kim's basement for like a month every day, 6 hours a day, and it began to feel too much like a job." So by the time the band got down to legendary Easley Studios in Memphis, Tennessee, they were already tired of the songs. Plus, famously impatient, Pollard quickly got tired of Deal's exacting process. After just a handful of songs were recorded, Bob decamped back to Dayton, reportedly to watch his son's basketball game. Deal was not happy, and it was the first crack in a relationship that would soon be irretrievably ruptured. The final straw was a show in Cincinnati where Deal's band, The Amps, was opening up for GBV. Guided by Voices hadn't left Deal's group enough time to soundcheck. Deal, thoroughly pissed off, proceeded to punch manager for life Pete Jameson in the stomach, causing him to double over. Pollard and Deal never spoke to each other again. This is a drag because they both seem like really cool people who would get along and pull out of each other really great things. Then again, and probably more realistically, Pollard and Deal were just too similar to ever have an ongoing and productive relationship. In fact, they might even have ended up being a bad influence on each other. Imagine an alternate universe where the two of them become a couple and Deal gets Pollard into hard drugs and they form some sort of Royal Trucks scuzz rock band. As much as I'd love to hear those records, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, not even Royal Trucks. Around this time, the band also worked with iconoclastic producer as well as a longtime Kim Deal associate, Steve Albini. Albini had reached out to Matador, wondering why GBV hadn't been in contact. Bob may have been flattered, but he was reluctant to get in touch. He wondered, why would Albini, who makes these big fucking hard-assed records, want to work with us in our little squeezed-down 4-track songs? However, reflecting how initially open-minded Bob was at the time, he was willing to try new working methods and personnel, even if it was having a habit of not working out. Pollard agreed, and the band went to Chicago to record with Albini. They recorded a few songs for the span of 3 days, and even though they all got along well, Bob wasn't happy with the results. "The thing about the stuff we did with Bob is," Bob later said, "I think we gave him inferior songs. I like what he did, but I don't much like the songs we did with him." The only songs that Albini worked on that ended up on the record are It's Like Soul and Sheet Kickers, and once again Albini is credited on the sleeve as Fluss. After recording with Albini in Chicago, the band left for a tour overseas. By the time they came back, Bob had decided to say goodbye to most of the songs from the previous sessions, as well as The Power of Suck. "All of the songs that we were doing with Kim Deal and Steve Albini were for the concept album," Bob said. "We went to Europe and did our tour, and when we came back, I had decided to shit-can the concept album, and I wrote a bunch of new songs, like 18 or 20 songs, and I thought they were better. They were more spontaneous and more free. They weren't geared toward a concept or anything, so we decided to record them in Dayton." But rather than fully retreat to the safety of their basements and just mashing together the studio stuff with the 4-track stuff, like they'd done on Propeller, GBV went into Dayton's Cro-Magnon Studios to record the new songs Bob had written while on the road. And, of course, once the Power of Suck idea was jettisoned, Pollard considered a number of titles for the record, among them the World Series of Psychic Phenomena, Plantations of Pale Pink, Under the Bushes, Under the Trees, and The Flying Party Is Here. The final title was, of course, Under the Bushes, Under the Stars, about which Bob said, "There's not a lot of room for silliness with a title like that." This makes sense since Pollard called the record more anthemic and a little bit more spiritual, and to me a bit more serious. Gone were the poorly recorded, half-finished thoughts and song fragments of Alien Lanes. This time around, the band had set out to put together a mature set of mid-fi tracks. After the record had been turned in, Matador decided to put the album's final 6 songs on an EP that would come with the vinyl record. The LP came in a gatefold sleeve, with an 18-track record on one disc and the 6-track EP as a separate 12-inch. This seems super odd to me since Matador had to battle with the band during the entire time they worked with them about how much stuff Pollard was releasing, so why essentially package 2 records together? In an article in Billboard a few months prior to the release of Under the Bushes, Patrick Amory, Matador's director of national sales, said that, "We have to stop them from giving us new records." He added that the label did everything they could to hold back the band from releasing more than one LP a year. So then why confuse things by packaging an EP with an LP? On the CD, the last 6 songs of the EP were considered bonus tracks, resulting in a 24-song record that's almost an hour long. All of that being said, the CD's cover for Under the Bushes doesn't list the final 6 songs since they were initially axed by Matador, but then added later on. The seeds of the band's eventual break with Matador seem to have been sown around this time. Bob, for a long time used to being the captain of the GBV ship, was unhappy to be limited in what he could put out under the band's name. "It's unfortunate that we're stuck in this situation where we can't put out as many albums as we did before," he complained. "Our new album is finished, but we have to wait 5 months to release it. That really hurts me. We'll have another album ready to go by then." Years later, Pollard would release as many as 3 GBV records in 1 year, something that would have made Gerard Cosloy's head explode. Of course, Cosloy, as we'll see later, had a real point. Bob's desire to flood the market with product is a horrible idea for a band who wants to last, and for a guy who wants to make being a musician his career. But Bob wasn't thinking in terms of shifting units or radio play. After being denied an outlet for his music for so long, he just wanted to get stuff out there. All of the indecision swirling around the record, from Pollard's usual tinkering with the track list to Matador's confusion about what in the hell to do with the band, would seem to imply that Under the Bushes adds up to a schizophrenic listening experience. However, this is GBV we're talking about. Pretty much all of their records up to this point were schizophrenic listening experiences. In fact, that's sort of why a lot of people, me included, like the band. So the hodgepodge nature of the record's creation and its track list doesn't strike my ears as odd or out of place. That being said, the length makes it difficult to enjoy in one sitting, and the amount of songs does seem excessive. This is something that was reflected in the LP's reviews and general reception, which seemed a bit more muted after a response to B-1000 and Alien Lanes, both of which were hailed as almost instant classics. Rolling Stone, in the band's first 3-star review, the band's 2 previous records, and the box set of pre-scat LPs all received 4 stars, gave the record tempered praise, stating that Under the Bushes searches for something new in the pop-rock ruins and finds that the quest is the thing. Spin magazine gave the record a paltry 6 out of 10, calling the LP brittle and overbaked, stating that Under the Bushes manages to showcase but a single new lo-fi trick, the art of carrying a tune while holding your nose. And Lorraine Ali, in a 2-star review in the LA Times, wrote, although Under the Bushes offers 24 songs free of rock and roll pomp and ultra-polished production, the album still can't help but feel self-conscious and contrived. The cover, again a collaboration between Pollard and Matador's in-house designer Mark O, strikes me as one of GBV's least interesting covers. The front features some found art of a landscape with a picture of a guy contained within a circle. The guy in the circle is just sort of plopped onto the rest of the cover. It isn't integrated at all into the overall collage. However, the fact that it's a circle pays a visual homage to the record or CD found contained within. In fact, this element was used as the basis for a limited edition picture disc 7-inch released in the UK. The back cover is even worse, featuring just an out-of-focus photo of a naked guy and a kid playing frisbee. The inside cover is a bit more interesting. The song titles are listed in all caps in a bold sans serif font, black on white. The album's credits are placed against a cool photo of a building that has mannequins attached to the outside. The perspective of the photo, not to mention that one of the mannequins has a creepy head that's staring right at the viewer, makes it an eerie and effective image. The same image is on the cover of the book 100, which features the front and back of the first 100 of Pollard's full-length releases. Of course, probably the most momentous thing about this record, and what happened to GBV in 1996, is that the band, what's come to be known as the so-called classic lineup, dissolved. This means no more Toby, no more Mitch, and no more Kevin. Bassist Greg Demos is also talked about as being part of this lineup, even though he was never really part of the touring lineup, having chosen to become a lawyer rather than join the band full-time. Toby left first, feeling the pull of family life and responsibility. He later said, "I felt like I'm in my 30s and what the hell am I doing? I've got to get my life together." Creatively speaking, I'd say his departure was the biggest blow to the band. Because as much as I love Bob and think he's a genius, I had really come to appreciate Sprout's songs sprinkled throughout GBV's records. His voice and his songs provided the perfect counterpoint to Pollard. And the fact that his contributions to the record we're discussing now are some of his best songs shows just what a hole he was leaving behind. I would also say that, by this point, Sprout didn't really need GBV. He'd created and carved out his own audience. This would be the year that saw the release of his first solo record, so the time seemed right for him to strike out on his own. In terms of Kevin and Mitch, this loss was probably a bigger deal to Pollard on an emotional level. They'd been with Bob since the beginning, since before the beginning. They were old friends from Northridge. They'd known Bob from high school. Kevin was Bob's brother-in-law, for Christ's sakes. These were ties that went beyond just the band. In terms of why they left, Kevin's resurgent substance abuse problem, long held in check, had become an issue during the band's European tour. His subsequent behavior brought matters to the point where Pollard looked upon Fennell's dismissal as a foregone conclusion. "I didn't fire Kevin," Bob later said. "He fired himself." And when it comes to Mitch, Bob tried to keep him in the band, initially moving him to bass as the guys from Cobra Verde joined the group as the new lineup. But Mitchell thought of it as a demotion. His interest waned to the point where Pollard felt he had to let him go, even though they'd been in bands together for decades. The breakup was big enough news that it was written about in a local paper, the Dayton Daily News, with Pollard quoted as saying, "The good ship guided by voices will continue on, but the existing personnel has decided to split. We were getting a little sick of looking at each other, and there are certain things, personal goals, people need to do." That's the story behind the record. Now let's get into it song by song. The LP starts, quite abruptly I might add, with Man Called Aerodynamics. It's a good opening song, but the fact that it just sort of starts and then just sort of ends with no real verse-chorus structure makes it sound a bit unresolved to my ears and not like the best song to open the record, especially when there's so many other great songs in the LP. The line, "Look it up in the bookmobile," seems to harken back to Pollard's days as a schoolteacher, while the next, "Look it up in the gun rack," speaks to some of the working-class characters he would chronicle in several of the later songs on the LP. Second song is Rhyme Jive Click.
Crowded gymnasiums, no shortage of knockouts, and a country dance, cellathon, over which spines are left.
This is a great example of the record's mid-fi sound. The buzz and hiss, that sandpaper sound you found on earlier records, is nowhere to be found here. It's not as slick as they'd get in a few years, but it's miles ahead of their lo-fi records. The opening line, "Crowded gymnasiums, no shortage of knockouts," seems to recall the inspiration behind the title to 14 Cheerleader Cold Front. Third song is Cutout Witch.
She could change your life, if she could, then I wish she would.
This is an awesome song. The build-up is really effective and it's just a really great rocker. The only downside is that the sound is a bit thin and doesn't at all convey what a monster this song is live. At any GBV show, if the pit isn't already going nuts, this is the song that's going to kick things off. I'm not sure what the lyrics mean, although cutouts, in terms of the recording industry, refer to records or CDs that have been discounted or remaindered. According to the website Music Weird, Cutouts took their name from the physical cut on the album cover that indicates that they are deleted titles. Over time, manufacturers also identified cutouts by drilling holes in records, stamping a message on the covers, or cutting off a corner of the album cover. Also, sometimes promo copies are notched or given the cutout treatment. The reason for all this is so that dealers can't try and return them to a distributor for a full refund, and of course so a consumer also couldn't try and return one of these to a store. When it comes to CDs, a circle cut into the barcode means that it's a promo, whereas when the sign of the jewel case is cut or notched, it's overstock. And of course, Under the Bushes also has a song called Lord of Overstock, so it's quite possible that now that Bob was on a bigger label and he was part of the actual recording industry, he had to worry about stuff like this. It's something he'd write about even more explicitly on the Mag Earwig tune I Am Produced. Next up is Burning Flag Birthday Suits. This starts out as a pretty minimal song, with Pollard singing against a lone electric guitar in a way that wouldn't sound out of place on the pre-scat LPs. But then, about a minute in, the whole band comes in and it sounds really great. The lyrics are also a lot of fun, showing Bob at his most inscrutable as he writes, "Don't open life alone. Contact the Empire Solutionaries. They cut the skin. They peel back the onion. Reveal the ghost blood. Fat black gas exudes, moves into the mirrored hall of empty values." You can tell with passages like this why one of his favorite songwriters is John Lennon. Fifth song is the official Iron Man rally song.
Just have to join in on this song.
In my opinion, this is up there with GBV's all-time best songs, like we're talking top 5. It's just great at every level. It's a good tune, Bob sounds good, the band sounds good, it just ticks all the boxes. Bob says the song's about the male concept of competition. He calls it GBV's We Are the Champions, which makes sense since it's a grand anthem in the tradition of other Guided by Voices mission statement rallying cry songs like Over the Neptune, Meshgir Fox, and A Salty Salute. The guitar solo was played by Trip Lampkins from Memphis band The Grifters. GBV had toured with The Grifters and were friendly with them, plus they were always being compared to them. Lampkins has, most recently, been in a band called Dragoon, whose most recent release is a single from 2016. Iron Man was the first single off the record, and it was accompanied by a video by Banks Tarver, the filmmaker who, around this time, was making the documentary Watch Me Jumpstart. The video, with its archival photos of Bob and the guys, brilliantly captures the twin strains of melancholy and joy that run through the song. However, if the label was at all concerned about the band seeming old, at least to an indie rock crowd, highlighting a bunch of photos from the 70s where Mitch Mitchell's wearing a ruffled shirt and Bob looks like he's headed to the prom probably wasn't the best idea. The only bad thing about the song is that, since this is one of the Kim Deal produced tracks, it makes me long for the full-length record the band could have made if only they'd stuck with it. I know it would have driven them crazy, but I think the results would have spoken for themselves. Plenty of bands have gone through the ringer to make great records, and you sort of wish that Bob had stuck it out for a couple more weeks. The next song is Tobin Sprout's first appearance on the record, To Remake the Young Flyer.
Yes, we must find his heart desire. Stand erect and not to take anything that we could not admire.
The 1-2 punch of this song, next to official Iron Man rally song, is pretty amazing since this is one of Sprout's best songs, next to one of Bob's best. The sound of this track is absolutely incredible. It has this really great riff that, along with the vocals, are coated in chorus and flange that it sounds totally psychedelic in the 60s. While a few bands are playing in that space today, groups like Animal Collective or Tame Impala, I would argue that in the 90s that sound was embraced only ironically. Bands like Jellyfish wore floppy hats and bell-bottoms, the Pooh Sticks pretended to be the second coming of the Partridge Family, and Red Cross covered the Carpenters. It was all a bit tongue-in-cheek. For the most part, 90s bands were more interested in being monochromatic than colorful. This is why Charles Peterson's black and white photographs have ended up being the perfect document of that era. But Bob and Toby, given their ages, were coming to these influences firsthand. It's just the stuff they heard growing up. There was no trace of irony when they embraced these sounds. The subject matter of this song pays yet another tribute to Dayton's history of flight, not to mention Sprout's own long-standing interest in planes and flying. The only bad thing about the song is that it's short at under 2 minutes. Next up is No Sky.
See you around, yeah. I wanted to call you around. See you around.
This is a really fine mid-tempo, mid-fi rocker that has a great vocal by Pollard. According to the Guided by Voices database, it's only been played live once, back in 2006, as part of a Robert Pollard solo show. Second to last song on side 1 is Bright Paper Werewolves.
Come on, polluted eyeballs, stop scouting out the field. Jump up, bright paper werewolves.
This is a super lovely song that sounds to me almost like a sequel to the Gold Heart Mountaintop Queen Directory. Magnet magazine has called this song's opening line, "Come on, polluted eyeballs, stop scouting out the fields," maybe the best opening line of Pollard's life. What Pollard's referring to with that title and in the song are lottery tickets. Basically, people trying to get rich off the lottery with bright, eye-catching scratch-off games, which Pollard calls bright paper werewolves. It's another instance of Bob seeing the underside of the dream and the trade-offs that come with success. Sure, a lottery ticket might bring you millions, but it's actually a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks friendly and benevolent, but really it's just out for your money. All you're going to get out of the experience is obscurity and misery. Last song on side 1 is Lord of Overstock. This song seems tied to Cutout Witch in terms of being about the downsides of being in a band. By 1996, Pollard had had a few years of being a professional recording artist, a process from recording in big studios to dealing with album release schedules he didn't seem to like very much. He was probably having to deal with issues like cutouts and overstock. Overstock being basically excessive stock or inventory, meaning the records that didn't sell. Alien Lanes wasn't quite the success the band or the label had hoped it would be, and some of that reality was creeping into Bob's lyrics. The song also seems a kindred spirit to the opening track off Revolver, Taxman, where George Harrison's rapacious taxman condescended to his citizens, saying, "Be thankful I don't take it all." 30 years later, Pollard's Lord of Overstock, along with his minions of overfed rats, declared, "We'll take every cent you earn." First song on side 2 is Your Name is Wild. The construction of this song is interesting in that it's just a 1-minute song that the band basically plays twice. The second half of the song is exactly the same as the first, except with some added harmony on the vocals. The subject is Pollard's daughter, Erica. Remember that Alien Lanes had a song about Bob's son, Brian. It's a really sweet song, with Pollard saying that he's paid the angels to keep his daughter safe. Pollard was just about to turn 40, and his kids were growing up, so he must have been going through some reflections about being middle-aged. Second song on side 2 is Ghosts of a Different Dream. Before segueing into a fast rocker, this song starts out as the most jangly GBV song in years, recalling the REM influence that cropped up on most of the self-released LPs. The subject matter of the song seemed to recall some of those side 2 propeller songs where Bob was wrestling with his ambitions and desires, singing about how the phantasms of his fantasies were hounding him. And after the success of GBV, Pollard knew firsthand that every dream has ghosts, even the ones that come true. Everything exacts a price. The song also makes mention of an ogre's trumpet blaring. Ogre's Trumpet was used as the name of GBV's 2018 live record, capturing a show from Asbury Park. Next up is Acorns and Orioles.
Over the summer
This nice acoustic song has the repeated refrain, "I can't tell you anything you don't already know." Given where Bob was in his life at the time, a professional recording artist who was having his songs critiqued and pulled apart for meaning, this could be seen as an attempt to demystify or short-circuit any attempt to find significance in his songs. It's a rebuke to, well, people like me who are digging into his lyrics or his life for answers. But as Cormac McCarthy wrote in Blood Meridian, your heart's desire is to be told some mystery. The mystery is that there is no mystery. The next song is Look at Them.
It's crippling. Never really knowing.
This is a spare and angular song that takes me back to some of the post-punk experiments of the early self-released LPs. It doesn't sound bad. Bob's vocal sounds really good actually, but the song goes on for way too long. Something that isn't helped by the fact that it blends into the next song, The Perfect Life. This is technically an instrumental, but to my ears, it's just an outro to the previous song. Either way, it's filler. Next song is Underwater Explosions.
While she was down and she opened, craved secrets, darker than the sheet.
The song starts out with Bob really drawing out the words, recalling Smothered in Hugs from B1000. The track then goes into full-on pop song mode, and it sounds great when it does. The line in the song, Something Passes Through Me, predicts an even popular GBV song, Glad Girls, where Pollard identifies that something, singing The Light That Passes Through Me. Bob's profile at the time was high enough that he was approached to write a song for a Tom Hanks movie called That Thing You Do. The movie's about a fictional band, a one-hit wonder who, in the mid-60s, rises and then falls based on the strength of one song, also called That Thing You Do. Bob was approached to write the band's one-hit song, only he refused. As Bob explained it, they told me that Tom wanted the title track to sound like a cross between La Bamba and Twist and Shout, as played by the Rascals. Huh? I just said, fuck that. The Rascals? I don't write that kind of shit. With all due respect to Pollard, he's out of his goddamn mind. This song sounds like the Rascals. Besides, he has songs coming out of his ears. He releases them in batches of 100 at a time. Bob could have knocked that song out in 10 minutes and been paid handsomely to do it. So why didn't he? Plus, the tagline of the movie was, "In every life there comes a time when that dream you dream becomes that thing you do." That was Bob's life. How could he not connect to that? I guess it all just goes back to the fact that we look to artists to confound us, to betray our expectations and give us something new. They go to places we refuse and indulge in experiences we can only dream of. They make the decisions we either don't have access to or just plain are afraid to make. The safe thing would have been to write the song and take the cash, but Pollard, just as he's shown time and time again, doesn't make safe choices, and I guess that's why we love him. Just for the record, Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne wrote the title track for That Thing You Do. The song ended up getting nominated for both a Golden Globe and an Oscar. So basically, Bob could have won an Academy Award. That's all I'm saying. Okay, next song is Atomize.
Up to where the astros flow into space, don't hold me down. Analyze, don't worry your brain. Take a break from every day.
This is pretty much a perfect track from Tobin Sprout. His songs for GBV had really blossomed over the past couple of records. The short acoustic tracks on B1000 gave way to the faster electric guitar songs in Alien Lanes, and on this record, he's got a full band sound on what were arguably the best songs he'd ever written up to that point. Sprouts played the song live with GBV as a solo artist, as well as with his post-GBV band, Eyes and Weasel. A different version of the song was also included on a 2002 charity record. The song was also played during a Peel session from 1996 where it sounded amazing. The next song is Don't Stop Now.
Woke up one morning, saw a rooster strutting by us. Six-pack rings round his neck, cock of the block. Don't stop now, don't stop now.
Again, what can you say except this is one of GBV's all-time best songs? And that's sort of what makes Under the Bushes kind of an odd record for me. I never consider it as one of GBV's best, and yet some of my all-time favorite GBV songs are on it. This track had been around for a while, with an early, stripped-down acoustic version included on King Shit and the Golden Boys. The first verse refers to the rooster, Big Daddy, pictured on the cover of the first GBV record, Devil Between My Toes. It's another one of the songs Kim Deal produced at Easley in Tennessee. Pollard's called this the Ballad of Guided by Voices, and for good reason. It's right up there with A Salty Salute for being a contender to be the band's theme song. It's just a really gorgeous track that, once it kicks in towards the end, with the whole band joining in, shoots into the stratosphere. The strings in the song are by Shelby Bryant. Bryant at the time was part of a Memphis synth band called The Clears. The Clears released one record in 1997 on Sonic Youth drummer Steve Shelley's Smells Like Records. Bryant is now a high school math teacher and has gone on to release music as a solo artist, most recently a cassette only released by a Belgium label in 2014 that was limited to just 70 copies. Last song on side 2 is Office of Hearts.
Roll out the painkillers. We'll have a killer workout. Sleepy boys, don't look. It's not in the gazette.
This is an okay song, but coming after 3 amazing tracks, it kind of ruins a run of really great songs, not to mention, if listening to it on vinyl, it's kind of a poor song to end the side. That being said, it's not without its charms. The line about an octopus caveman having a girl on every arm is pretty funny, but overall it definitely feels like a minor song. This is where the 18-song single disc ends, but of course there are another 6 songs. This is why this record always seems sort of weird to me, like, what's the actual record? Does it have 18 tracks or 24? Anyway, the first bonus track, or the first song on the EP, or the 19th song on the record, however you choose to look at it, is Big Boring Wedding.
I have entered a shiny new realm, a very different and very spoiled world. It's with great pleasure I introduce myself to call it thank you for such delicious.
This is another one of the leftovers from the Kim Deal sessions, and like pretty much everything they recorded in Memphis, it sounds great. The song has the line, "Thank you for such delicious pie." The phrase delicious pie would show up later on the Hardcore UFOs box set as part of the title of a disc of unreleased songs, which was called Delicious Pie and Thank You for Calling. Next is It's Like Soul Man. This is one of the few songs to make the LP from the short-lived Steve Albini sessions. It sounds okay, but it's kind of muddled. And as amazing a producer as he is, to my mind pairing Steve Albini with Tobin Sprout doesn't make a lot of sense, which is maybe why this track was considered more of a bonus track than being on the proper record. That being said, I think this is a great song, and once again, Sprout contributed amazing songs to this record. If he's George Harrison to Pollard's Lennon McCartney, then this record was his Abbey Road. This is another song that had been around for a while. At one point, a 4-track version was included on a working version of B-1000. Sprout would go on to record the song yet again for his solo record, Carnival Boy, which was released just a few months after Under the Bushes. Next is Drag Days.
Drag days are not so bad, but move too slow. I file them, I want them not to linger so.
This is another of the Kim Deal songs, and like the rest of those songs, it sounds great and is a really good track. How something like this, or really almost any of these final half-dozen songs, ends up as a bonus track is just nuts. It was written by Bob when he was young, just 20 or 21, and it was originally called In a Germantown, Germantown being an area southwest of Dayton. Drag Days refers to the lull between things that are exciting, tours, recording projects, or whatever. Next up is Sheet Kickers.
Cover your eyes. The light is too bright. You're wise men, they tell you lies.
This is another Albini song, as well as one that had been intended for the power of suck. It's an okay song, but it sounds a bit 90s. A shorter version of the song, entitled Cock Soldiers, was included on early versions of the LP when it was still called The Flying Party Is Here. Second to last song is Red Men and Their Wives.
Fall out of bed, they're issuing lives for red men and their wives, offering hands and twiddling thumbs for dreams that never come.
You really have to love Bob for some of the decisions he makes when it comes to sequencing. Only he would put the longest track on their longest record at the very end of the LP. Also, relegating this song to a bonus track or an EP is nuts, since this is one of the most beautiful and humane songs Pollard's ever written. It's just an all-around tremendous song. It's another one of his thoughtful reflections on where he comes from, the same as Hank's Little Fingers. In that song, he defended the mountain men, and here he's lamenting the fate that befalls red men and their wives, by which he means rednecks and not Native Americans. He's writing about the lack of choices that are given to young adults in rural, blue-collar towns, including Northridge, where Pollard grew up. You grow up and get married right away. As Pollard says, have kids, have a family, get a job and everything. That's what you do. You don't even know what else there is. Even Bob didn't know, since that's the path he followed. Pollard admitted, I was part of that. As he writes in the song, your life is issued to you. You have no say in the matter. Also, the whole game of life is rigged, Pollard writing. The way I see it, they've already lost. And the people to whom this is happening are too passive or depressed to resist, muttering to themselves, then so be it. This is Bob at his empathetic best. It's not the Pollard of wizards and elves and spacemen. It's Bob as a really intelligent songwriter with things to say. And then, musically, the song's just amazing. It starts off spare and melancholy, and yet by the end, once the whole band kicks in, it turns into a fist-pumping anthem. It's one of GBV's all-time best songs, and while it would have been amazing to end the record there, there's one more track, Take to the Sky. This is an odd choice to end what Bob has said is a more serious record, since it's short and a kind of silly song that has what seems to be nonsense lyrics and doesn't really go anywhere. It was part of track lists for the LP going back to 1995, so it's a song Pollard had wanted on the record since the beginning, though I don't really know why. The mention of the Chinaman isn't terribly PC in 2018 and, quite frankly, would have seemed out of place even in 1996. Even when Devo had a character named that in the 70s, it felt out of date, and was used more or less for shock value, so I'm not sure how or why Pollard's using it here. Anyway, the song's a slightly underwhelming ending to a record that boasts some of the best and most mature songs the band had recorded up to that point and would, quite frankly, ever record. Okay, that's it for the show. In the next episode, I'll be looking at the band's 10th record, 1997's Mag Earwig. It was the first LP produced without the so-called classic lineup, and it was the last record GBV will record for Matador, at least in the 90s. Until then, subscribe to the show, leave a review, and God bless the Monument Club.
Diss on the sexless, the new drunk tribe.